Many people would say that one of the most important and valuable things that they own is the contents of their camera roll. So many of life's memories are captured through the camera on your phone and therefore stored on your phone. But with the size of modern pictures and videos being as large as they are, it's likely that this takes up room quite quickly. Usually people solve this by paying for a service like iCloud or Google Photos. And these services are great. They seamlessly integrate with a lot of technologies and devices that you already use, and they're kind of just built into an ordinary workflow. But one problem I do have with them is the broad usage license agreement that those services get when you upload your personal pictures to them. That's personally something that I'm not a super big fan of. That is why in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up your very own service like Google Photos. You can choose specific albums and images to automatically back up to your own server on your own network. And if you're particularly ambitious, you can even configure things like local machine learning for things like face detection. That way, you can have complete confidence that you have control and ownership of your data. The name of this service is called Immich. It boasts a vast feature set that includes everything from automatic mobile backups to built-in light editing tools to the machine learning features that I mentioned earlier that include things like facial recognition. It does all of this without requiring a particularly powerful system. If you do have all of the machine learning features enabled, it only requires 2 cores and at minimum 6 GB of RAM, although 8 is recommended. If you don't care for the machine learning features, you can get away with even less. At just 2 cores and 4 GB of RAM, you can get this up and running on your very own system. You will also obviously need storage, and the amount of storage or hard drive space that you have depends on your needs. If you have a lot of photos and pictures that you want to back up, obviously you're going to need probably a couple of terabytes. But honestly, I've been able to get away with only a single terabyte for the time being. That being said, I'm not a super picture taking heavy person, so I probably have a lighter gallery than a lot of other people would. I am assuming that if you are watching this video that you already have a passing understanding of what Immich is and have decided that you want to use it. This video is more dedicated to an easy and complete setup of the basic Immich features. I'm going to run through this on Unraid because that is what I am running, but you can get Immich in the form of Docker containers and run it on all kinds of different operating systems if that's what fits your needs. So without further ado, let's just get right into some of the fun stuff. First, you're going to need to create a new share where Immich is going to store all of these pictures. To do that, go to Unraid and then you're going to go over to your Shares tab. In the Shares tab, on the bottom, left-click Add Share. Name the share whatever you like. I'm just going to go with image_pictures. If you have an SSD cache array, please make sure that you set the primary storage to cache and the secondary storage to your desired array. Ensure also that the mover action is going from cache to array. This configuration means that Immich will use the higher speed SSD cache to initially write your data. This can significantly improve performance when auto backing up all of your pictures and videos. The mover action indicates to Unraid that when it deems it a good time, it will move data from the cache to the array for longer term storage. With all of that out of the way, we can move on to setting up all of the containers that we're going to need. Before we set up the big Immich container, there are 2 prerequisites that we need to get out of the way: Redis and Postgres. We're going to go ahead and start with installing Redis, which is the easiest of these things to configure. Redis is an open source data structure that stores all of its data in RAM, meaning that it's very fast. Immich uses Redis to manage job queues. On their very website, when talking about the architecture, Immich says that some jobs trigger subsequent jobs. For example, Smart Reach and facial recognition relies on thumbnail generation and automatically run after one is generated. Now that we know what Redis is for, let's go ahead and get it installed. To get Redis, go to the Apps tab of Unraid and simply search Redis. Get the official container simply named Redis. Once you find the container, hit install and you will soon enter the configuration page. I recommend renaming this container to signify that it is specifically for Immich, just in the event that you have other Redis images already running or will have them running in the future. The rest of the configuration is as simple as finding an open port. Hopefully, the default port is open on your server. To check this, click the Show Docker Allocations button and then use Control-F to bring up the search bar and simply check to see if the default port is used somewhere else. If it is, just change the configuration to a port that is not used by another container. I usually just increment up the default port by 1 until I find an open port. Once you have your port configured, go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom of the page and hit Done. Let Unraid pull the container and do all of the installation. And once the downloading has finished, click done and boom, you've got Redis. That's step 1. Next, let's move on to installing Postgres. The setup for Postgres is a lot similar to Redis, but first, what does Immich need Postgres for? Postgres is a database structure, and Immich uses it to store important persistent information like users, albums, and other metadata like that. It doesn't actually store your pictures, it just stores all of the supporting architecture around it. To get Postgres, head over to the App Store once again and search for Postgres Immich. We are looking specifically for the PostgreSQL _Immich by Space Invader 1. This is a tailor-made container for Immich. Click install and go into the configuration page. The setup here is a bit more complicated than Redis, but still fairly simple. Again, I recommend renaming the container to associate this Postgres container with Immich. Next, set a secure password and make sure to mark it down somewhere. I recommend a quality password manager. You will also want to change the Postgres user. It doesn't really matter what you use, but I would stick with something descriptive. Do the same with PostgreSDB. You'll need all of these fields in order to connect the main Immich container to Postgres. I'll touch on that later. The database storage path can likely stay the same, as the default is just in your app data folder. Finally, configure your port by doing the same thing we did with Redis. Check your Docker allocations and change your port to something that isn't already in use by another container or app. When you've got that configured, go ahead and scroll down and hit done, wait for it to install, and then hit done again, just like we did before. With Redis and Postgres installed, it's time to get into the big dog, the actual Immich container. As before, go to the Apps tab and search for Immich. Find the one by ImageGenius and, as before, click Install and go into the configuration page. If you have a pop-up asking you which branch to choose to install, then you'll have to choose based on your needs. If you want just an easy setup, go with default. That's what I'm going to be doing. If you don't want any machine learning features at all, choose the no ML version. If you're going to be using machine learning features, choose either CUDA for NVIDIA GPUs or OpenVINO if you have another brand's GPU. For our purposes here, I'm going to be doing the default. This is the most involved configuration so far, but it looks a lot worse than it is, don't worry. Start off by changing the port if needed. Follow the same exact pattern as before by checking the current Docker allocations until you find something that is available. Next, set your photos path to the share that we set up earlier. In my case here, that is mount user Immich pictures. For now, leave the libraries path empty as we aren't setting up any external asset tracking. The DB hostname, DB username, and DB password are the fields we just configured in Postgres. Hey, future me here. I'm editing this video and I realized that I was wrong about the DB host name. It's not actually the name that you set up in the Postgres container, it's the IP address of that Postgres container, which you can find by going and seeing the LAN IP/port column in your Docker tab of Unraid. So that's what you've got to put in that slot, not the database name. That goes a little bit down below. You can open your Postgres configuration in another tab and just copy and paste your values over like I'm doing here. After your database settings are configured, you've got to input your Redis host name. This is likely just the IP address of your Unraid machine. To double check, go to the Docker tab, find the Redis instance for Immich, and look under the LAN IP port column. Be sure just to import the IP address, so the part before the colon, in the hostname variable input in the Immich configuration. The port will go in another spot momentarily. After you have the hostname done, go ahead and fill out your PostgreSDB port, which is just the port that you use for your Postgres container, and the Redis port, which, as an absolute shocker to nobody, is the port of your Redis container. From here, the rest of the settings can just stay as their default, as they are for advanced configurations that I'm not covering in this video. After you've got the configurations how you need them for your setup, once again hit done, wait for the download and install, and then hit done again. At this point, you should have Redis, Postgres, and Immich already installed. I would recommend putting all three of these into a folder together so that you can keep all of the Immich related containers in the same visual area. It makes it a little bit easier to manage. To do this, I use the Folder View 2 plugin, and I made a video about essential Unraid plugins that I'm using, which you can go watch. I'll put it on a card somewhere here in whichever corner it is, so that you can get that set up. Now you can go into the Immich web app. So simply click on the Immich icon in Unraid and hit Web UI. This will take you to Immich, where you can do your initial login and create your initial admin user. There's more configurations that you can do in Immich, like choosing how your files are going to be named, how they're going to be stored, any machine learning, and things like that. But for now, this is just a standard setup, and I would encourage you to dive into some of those details and learn about it on your own. At this point, you're also going to want to download the Immich app on whatever mobile device you're using, where all of your pictures are. They do have an Android and iOS version of this app, so you should be covered on both fronts. I'll leave a link to a guide with a little bit more detail for this, but once you log into the app, you should be able to connect to your server. So there you have it. This is a guide to a basic Immich install to get you started. There are a few things that I recommend that you do after this initial setup. I would strongly encourage you to look at buying a domain and using some sort of reverse proxy or Cloudflare tunnel to make Immich accessible outside of your network. That means that you can auto backup through Wi-Fi when you're on someone else's network or through your mobile data if that's something that you choose to do also. Otherwise, Immich will wait until you get connected back to your network to do its automatic backing up. I would also encourage you to dive into some of the other features and functionalities to make sure that Immich is configured in the way that you want it to run and that is good for your use case. But I hope you're able to follow along. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in a comment down below. If this was helpful to you at all, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more content like this. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.